Welcome back, Chappelle. All right, welcome back on this Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday? No, it's Tuesday. Feels like a Monday, right? Shout out to my A period class. You guys did a great job today. A lot of good conversation, like Michelle dropping knowledge, Kylie doing great stuff. All right, so very impressed. All right, you guys did a great job. But in that class and in the rest of our classes today, we got up to about right here, right? We talked about like the division now between the West and the East after the Persian Wars. We talked about how Athens is getting a little cocky by this point. They have this guy leading them named Simon, and he's kind of a jerk, right? But after that dude is ostracized following the failed attempt to help out the Spartans, so enters your man, your boy, while I try to make sure that my computer is plugged in, Pericles, right? So Pericles is the man, all right? Pericles is awesome, all right? So Pericles does great things, even though a lot of historians disagree with my statement. A lot of historians are like, oh, well, he's just a populist, and he just wants to make all the Athenians happy. Well, I kind of think if you're trying to make your own people happy, that kind of makes you a good ruler. So, you know what, Jared Diamond, why don't you shut up? All right, so anyway, now, I don't actually mean that. I think Jared Diamond's a great historian. Now, anyway, but this dude was elected Archon 29 years in a row, right? That is ridiculous. If anyone is elected anything 29 times in a row, there is a good shot that they're making a large group of people very, very happy. And he did that for the Athenians. And he did it in a lot of different ways, right? But this right here is one of his busts, right? Every time he has actually created, a bust was created of him, 9 times out of 10, he always had the Athenian military helmet hanging off the back of his head, right? Now, for example, I was never mind. All right. So anyway, shout out. Look, if there's any Camden Catholic kids watching this right now, shout out to my lacrosse players, right? How we all wear our helmets on the backs of our heads like that, thinking we're cool when we're actually not. Now, anyway, but that is Pericles, the man, the myth, the legend, right? Doing all kinds of stuff. He actually was emblazoned on a lot of Greek money this way. Like modern Greek money for a long period of time had that exact profile with him actually pictured on their coins, right? So if you've done some things, that means he must have had a lot of major accomplishments, right? And so let's go through them, right? We're not going to sit there and be like, well, he came from a very wealthy Athenian family and moved his way up through politics. Let's get to the meat, right? The meat of it is he accomplished a lot of stuff, which made him such a good leader for the Athenian people. Now, some of y'all are immediately like, well, what about Sparta? Well, remember, Sparta's cleaning up after an earthquake and a Helot revolt, right? So don't get those things confused. If you were paying attention in class, you would know that, all right? So now, but his unfortunate conquest of many other places is not what we want to talk about right now. He did kind of try to turn Athens into an empire, but we're not, not every leader is great, all right? You know what I mean? When I talk about Napoleon, I'm always just like, duh. He wasn't nice to women, but I like his politics. All right, so anyway, now, but his big things, his glaring great things, one of the biggest ones is he builds walls around all of Athens and their naval base. Now, during the ancient period, erecting or building a wall was a huge deal because it took a lot of means, a lot of money, a lot of manpower, and it provided you with a great defense, right? So now this is, of course, during the ancient period when you're only defending something about yay big. You know what I mean? So now he also builds them around their new naval base, though, right? Because Athens is well known for its what? Its naval fleet. That is exactly right, Nicole. Good job. All right, so now the naval base that there was built there at the port of Athens, he has the entire wall around it completely rebuilt, and it was amazing, great for defense. He has the Acropolis rebuilt. For the test, don't forget, every Greek polis has how many parts? Good job, Holly. 2, right? So, and all of those parts, what are they? Good job, Callie. The Acropolis, everything else down here, right? So, and then of course the Agora is inside of everything else. It's very important to remember that stuff. Now, anyway, but he had the Acropolis rebuilt because remember the Persians came in and destroyed it, and he had a new statue inside of the brand new Parthenon, which is a very famous building in ancient Greece that we'll talk about in 2 seconds. The statue inside of it of Athena was huge. It was built completely out of ivory and gold. Now, just a heads up, that is the Parthenon as it looks now. Of course, it's in ruins because it was ruined, right, several times from different invasions and also shoddy upkeep. Now, but the Parthenon is a very famous building. It's an architectural marvel. It was filled with Doric-style Greek columns and is a very, very good piece of Greek architecture in general, right? And also, we have several buildings in our nation's capital that are actually modeled off of this, right? The front of the I think it's the front of the White House, the Lincoln Memorial, as well as several other places throughout the country, but also the two wings of the Capitol building are designed off the Parthenon as well. So, and this right here, that is the statue or the replica of the statue that was built inside of that temple. That thing is ridiculous. It's also huge. If I had to estimate how big this thing is, it's easily 30 feet, all right? A 30-foot tall statue of Athena dripping, right? Ivory, gold, ridiculous. That right there is a showing of wealth. But also, really quickly, some of y'all are like, but Mr. Terry, my name is Taylor, and I'm really upset that the Athenians are using all of that money from the Delian League to rebuild statues that are completely plated in gold. I mean, I agree with you. It does look a little dicey. Doesn't look like the best, like socioeconomically speaking. But you are right. And also, like I said in class earlier today, there's a reason for this baby right here. I don't want to do any updates. So anyway, now, really quick, no, we're not talking about the East. No, we're not talking about these things. But I shot into Google get money, and this is one of the first results that came up, and I thought it was hilarious. So I went with it. Now, this is actually a Japanese baby and a pile of yen, because it's very important to remember, before Pericles, government workers were completely unpaid. They were always had to be rich, right? So because they're the only ones who could afford to work in the government if they're not getting paid, right? So okay, I'll look at the fantasy football thing later. All right. Now, what Pericles does though is he comes in and he gets government workers pay. By doing this, it opens up working in the government as an actual like 9-to-5 job. So even the poor could now participate in their politics, right? Now the poor could be involved in their politics and actually run for elections themselves, right? So that is a huge, huge step forward. You can easily just put paid government workers for this slide, right? And we even do this now. Like, had Pericles not been around, we may never have actually gotten around to paying government workers, and it might have been only an occupation for the wealthy. But now senators make $175,000 a year, the vice president makes $230,000 a year, and the president makes $500,000 a year, and gets a free house, and a free plane, and a free helicopter, and a free military. A lot of other free stuff, too. Now, anyway, but that is a huge deal. He also, though, is going to do, besides, he's also going to create pay for government workers. He's going to create equal elections. And he's going to then create free theater seats for the poor. Now, some of you are like, why is that such a big deal? Well, it's a huge deal. Because the theater seats is like, going to the theater was one of the only ways that Greeks had recreation outside of just going to the agora at all, right? So creating a section of theater seats that were free to poor people of the public makes him a great leader, because he is now opening up something that was once closed off to the poor, and is something that is just so fluidly Greek culture, right? So really, really neat fact, this thing right here is an this is an amphitheater, because it's actually from the Latin meaning both sides, right? So ampha, both sides. Now, he also had a bunch of different odeons created, right? And odeons were places where like poems could be read or songs could be sang and stuff like that. So he had a lot of these odeons built, O-D-E-O-N. And somebody remind me really quickly tomorrow, be like, hey, you said you were going to prove a point and show us how history is in our face all the time. Just don't let me forget, all right? So put a star, be like, tell Mr. Terry to tell him that thing, all right? So now, really, really quick. So free theater seats for the poor is huge. And also the theater, like the theater styles of the Greeks is another big thing that you actually interact with quite often, right? If you've ever seen the symbol of the theater, the happy mask and the sad mask, right, is actually of Greek origin, right? Because actually actors would be wearing giant masks while they performed shows in these amphitheaters made of stone, so the public could actually see their face from a larger distance and also could tell the emotions that they were wearing on their face. And also just to assume the character a little bit easier. And so there was a no question kind of an idea that, oh, that's Zeus, and oh, that's Achilles, right? Or oh, they're doing the Iliad today, right? So like that was a huge deal. And it's also a huge deal too, because now you don't have to necessarily be able to read, right? You don't have to be able to read to do these things. Don't write this yet. Now, but this is considered a golden age of Pericles, right? We already wrote down golden age in class, so you don't need to write it again, all right? So let me move myself. Oh, God, what's going on? All right, so let me move myself back over here. Now, there we go. So the golden age, of course, is a time of great prosperity and growth. And this is also going to see the growth of the Athenian Empire, right? So the Athenians are going to expand their influence and turn themselves into the first, like, borderline Greek empire, right? Which is kind of a scary thing. But there's going to be new art, theater, jobs, and a great economy is going to flourish under Pericles, right? And then all the while, who is this driving absolutely insane? Go ahead, you can pause this real quick and get after it, but this is the flow. I got to go, right? Sparta. Sparta is becoming more and more furious with this as time goes on, right? Sparta is flipping out. They're super upset. They're getting so bent out of shape because the Athenians are spreading their influence, right? The Athenians are turning into the Greek Empire while Sparta, having to clean up this earthquake, clean up this Helot rebellion, and clean up all the stuff going on, is watching their main rival grow in prosperity. Spartans aren't having that crap, right? They're just like, no. Just give us time, right? So you don't need all this. This is all like honor stuff. Oh, but this is huge, right? So, and then a last element before we go any further. This needs to be topped off by itself, all right? Just write in nice, big, fat, bold letters, philosophy. During the age of Pericles, you had the growth of one of the most groundbreaking intellectual trends, art trends, everything combined into one, and that is the growth of philosophy, right? So philosophy did not have its birth under the age of Pericles, but it did become like mainstream under Pericles, right? You had a ton of other philosophers that came before the big three that we're about to talk about. You had like Heraclitus, who talked about like the flow of different like particles and stuff like that, like early philosophy. You had Democritus. Democritus talked about how like the earth must be made up of individual little building blocks, almost kind of giving way to the idea of atoms that build us as people, right? You had tons of philosophers that actually preceded all of these people. My favorite is Diogenes. If you ever want to know a story about Diogenes, just be like, hey, what's up with that guy Diogenes? Like, I'll tell you all about him. It's hilarious. But he actually was around during these people's time. But you had, there were philosophers, but the big three emerged as mainstream idealists and ideals under the age of Pericles, right? Even though, ironically enough, Pericles didn't even get along with the first one. The first big three philosopher, the father of modern-day philosophy, literally kind of disliked Pericles and thought he was kind of a tool, right? So now, anyway, lastly though, classical Greece is going to give way to the age of the philosopher, right? So, speaking of what philosophy means, philosoph means a lover of wisdom, right? I love philosophy. If any of you are interested in philosophy, even a little bit, I am totally down to sit down and talk with you about it. I have a phenomenal book that I recommend to you. It's called Sophie's World. It's actually a history of Western philosophy. I have 2 copies of it in my room if you're just kind of interested. It's actually really cool. Never mind. We're not going to do that right now. Now, anyway, so philosophers are going to begin to turn away from the myths, which gets a bunch of them into hot water. Now, anyway, but the philosophers begin to kind of turn away of this idea of the myths explain our daily lives, because that right there is what myths were used for. Myths were used to explain things that Greeks could otherwise not understand. Science didn't exist yet, right? Science didn't exist to help explain the sun rises and sets because we're going around it, right? No, the myths would be well, Apollo, he pulls it over, So the myths were just kind of basic ways for regular people to understand the things happening around them, right? But of course, as we know, the myths are complete fiction, right? So the philosophers, on the other hand, are going to begin to turn away from these things. They're going to be like, well, why do people act the way they do? Why are we alive? What happens to us when we die? Is this real? What's going on? What's evil and what's bad? Well, what's bad and good? What is that? You know what I mean? So they're going to start trying to use logic to explain the natural world. And the first one, the head honcho, the father of the whole shebang, is this guy right here, Socrates, right? We're going to hoof it through all these guys, and I'll be done here in about 3 minutes, all right? Socrates is the big guy, right? He was born poor, right? Very, very poor, and he wrote absolutely nothing, right? So, he wrote down nothing. Some people argue that he didn't know how to write, all right? So some historians do. Probably, it's a maybe, you know what I mean? We're not really sure. But the big thing about Socrates is he kind of pushed away the ideas of a wealthy society. And he was like, you know what? You don't need money and wealth to be rich. All you need is intelligence, right? Which I agree with, Socrates. I don't agree with your lifestyle and stuff like that. We'll talk about that some other time if you want to know about that. But all right, so now, but also, he taught for free. He did not charge money for his intelligence, which is also very Christ-like in a sense, right? A lot of people actually go back and forth. They were like, well, Socrates is kind of like the Christ of the ancient Greeks because he believed in truth, explanation, good things, like karmic ideas of like the universe, and then also spreading wealth and knowledge for free, right? So he asked questions like, what is the meaning of life? And is perfection possible? You know what I mean? He asked these questions because that was his motif. His entire thing was called the Socratic Method, right? So the Socratic Method was literally like asking people questions constantly until they understand their own ignorance, right? So I highly suggest you do this to your friends. All right, so now asking nothing but questions until you realize how stupid you are about thinking a certain thing. Like, for example, why do we do half the things that we do, right? Why do some of you have an Instagram? Because you like it, right? Well, why do you like it? Because it helps pass the time. Why do you need to pass the time? Like, so we do a lot of really silly things in life that don't really make a lot of sense, right? I'll probably Socratic Method one of y'all a little bit later tomorrow and just freak you out a little bit, all right? But it's kind of like what he wanted to do is show you that the things that drive us as humans are just innate wants and desires to either measure up to people around us or to try and fill in the ideas of what we believe we're supposed to be, which is really scary and creepy when you think about it. But yeah, no, he actually ended up dying. He was executed by the Greek state. The Athenians had him executed. He had to drink poison by force because he actually started talking down about the gods and the myths. Also because of the failed invasion of Syracuse, but that's completely different. All right, so now, then there's this guy. This is his protege, right? His protege is Plato. No, not Play-Doh, the stuff y'all ate when you were little, which is gross. You're not supposed to do that. Plato with a T, all right? Plato was born to a wealthy family, and he's Socrates' main student. He actually wrote down most of Socrates' ideas for him, right? He is the father of the school of thought known as rationalism, which is the belief that the human mind can use reason and logic to solve anything, all right? So that you can use your mind to understand anything, right? Ironically enough, that Diogenes guy, the other philosopher, him and these two guys had a huge beef with one another, and it's really hilarious. You can ask me about it later. But he's also a major writer. He wrote this thing called The Republic and another one called The Allegory of the Cave, which I'll explain tomorrow because I'm running out of time, all right? I don't want to take up your entire evening. Now, anyway, so then you've got the third of the big three, right? So you got Aristotle. So we've got S-A-P-A. We'll come up with a way to remember him tomorrow, all right? But Aristotle, who is a student of Plato, right? So, and he believes in things like moderation. He teaches ethos, logos, pathos, which is also how we write to this day. Bring this up to your English teacher. Be like, ethos, logos, pathos, what's those mean, all right? So ethos is ethics and trustworthiness. Logos is logic, and pathos is using sympathy or understanding your reader, right? So we use these in writing to this day, right? So, and he's also the father of empiricism, which is basically learning from experience. Jot this down with Socrates real quick. Listen to me. He also wanted to break down everything into its most basic form. And we'll talk about that a little bit in class tomorrow as well when we compare Plato and Aristotle a little bit. We'll have a really short warm-up tomorrow before we get into stuff. But the biggest thing and the last thing you need to write down, I'm just going to run through this real quick, so like I said, I don't take up too much of your time, all right? But the biggest and last thing is the impact of the philosophers. They're going to start using observation as a way to understand the world, right? They're going to teach us how to think logically, and they're going to teach us to question whether or not assumed truths are real and what the difference between opinion and fact is, right? So philosophy is huge. I love it personally. I think it's an amazing kind of concept and school of thought. But that's where we're going to wrap up for today, right? So that's the classical age in ancient Greece, right? Classical age of Athens. And we're going to get into the Hellenistic period tomorrow. So I hope you guys have a great evening. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great one.